Hi guys, we have created a Langgraph based workflow that can generate diagram, validate it, and return it from an endpoint. So in the backend, I have a Fastapi server with a Langgraph workflow implementation, and for the UI, I'm using React. So here, user can select any type of diagrams here, and user can give any input here. Based on that input, it will create and return the diagram from the fast API backend. So if you select flowchart or sequence diagram or class diagram, it will generate uh, these accordingly. I will show the demo of how the things are working. And without further delay, we can look into what is there in our backend. So I have a fast API server that is running in port 8008. And if you go to APIs, we can see my graph router here. There, I'm importing a graph workflow. This graph workflow is created using Langgraph, and I'm using that final graph and invoking that final graph and returning the response as a text syntax. And in the UI, I will be rendering that using a package called Mermaid. There is a package available in React for Mermaid rendering, and I will render the content here. So if you go to the backend code, I have a visualization graph here, and it has two nodes. I will quickly show the graph structure here. So once the user input the data, it will go to the first node, which is graph generation node, and in the second node, it will validate the code. So I have added certain prompts using the Mermaid official documentation. So I have given the documentation as prompt here. I have optimized the prompt and given the documentation as prompt. And based on the documentation, it will validate the generated graph. If it is valid, then it will return the graph syntax. Otherwise, it will generate the code again, and it will reflect the taking, and it will validate again, and it will return the response. So I have created it as a reflection agent. So once we go to the code, as I said, there is a graph code creation node. So inside that node, I have given the common guidelines that is applicable for all the graph types, and I have prompt templates for different types of graphs. So this will be dynamically get feeded to the LLM based on what graph the user selects here. If he selects a flowchart, then only the flowchart syntax will get fed to the LLM. So if you see here, I have one Gemini API key I got from Google Playground. I have put it here in my env, and I'm importing that API key using I'm setting it as an environment variable. Then from LangChain, I'm importing chat Google Generative AI package, and I'm initializing my LLM here. So I got my LLM initialized. Then I'm importing that LLM here. So you can see here, I'm importing my model here, and using that model, I'm generating the code. So this is my generate code function, and this is my generate graph code node. So I'm passing a graph state here. So what is inside the graph state is the graph state contains the graph input, which is nothing other than what the user inputs from the UI here, and that will get stored in this graph input. And the graph type is whatever graph type user selects from here. That also get updated in the graph state, and the graph code, which is the response that we needed, and this one is the reflection that contains the whether the graph is valid or not. It is a boolean value, and a critic, which is a string, whether if it is not valid, then why it is not valid, and if it is valid, then why it is valid. So this is my endpoint. Here, taking the graph input, graph type, and beforehand I'm passing this inputs to the final graph. And once the final graph gets called, this graph input and graph type will be readily available for the final graph for execution. So once the input comes here, the right now we have the graph state and graph type. For the graph type and user's input is available in the state. So we will access the input and graph type here, and we will dynamically select the prompt for that particular graph type, and we will generate the code. So here I have given the prompt like this. This is nothing but basic documentation I bought from Mermaid, and I picked that documentation and I optimized it and created a prompt from that for each diagram, and it will dynamically fetch the appropriate diagram prompt. And in the generate code function, it will take the appropriate template for prompt, and then it will create a response from that. So once the graph code get created, we will check the condition where the graph is valid or not. If it is valid, the flow will end there. If it is not valid, then the execution will start again. So the validator node, if you come here in the validator node, there are also one reflect prompt template is there. It contains all the validation checks that is needed to be done on the generated code in the previous step. So here it will, I have created a reflection chain. So what it will do is it will create a reflection chain, and we can call that chain here with the generated code and type. It will check the conditions in the reflection prompt, and it will, in the reflection, it will say whether the graph is valid or invalid. So the output of this chain will be this mentioned in the reflection parser. So if you go to reflection, this is my reflection parser's output. So here you will get the whether the graph is valid or not, and why it is valid, why it is invalid. And if it is valid, then it will check a condition here. So if you go to the graph workflow, here you can see I'm creating a workflow, and I have added the nodes and edges, and there is a conditional edge that the take one function should continue. What there is, if the graph is valid, then end the flow. If it is invalid, then continue. So based on that condition, it will, if it is valid, it will end the execution. If it is invalid, it will continue to the first node. So that is the entire workflow. So and for the UI, I am using Mermaid JS package for React, and I have created a simple UI for that, and I am rendering the graph here. So if I select flowchart and I am giving e-commerce application, it will generate a flowchart for e-commerce application. So whatever thing we type here, it will generate a text syntax for Mermaid using that Fastapi, and it will display it here. Okay, so you can see the diagram here. Without API key or any paid subscription from Mermaid, we can generate this type of diagrams using our LLM only. So that's all about this video. Hope you liked it. If you liked it, please do subscribe and share. Thank you.